mother's story, as she let me know. Her dad, Leopold Kessler, came from Poland, son of Solomon Kessler in Krakow, who Mom said were a very rich family. He became a civil servant, which is a very poignant story, because in the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem, Mom has written down 2 jobs that he had. He was a civil servant, she said, but he also worked in an abattoir, and as it turned out, that was a cruel Nazi joke. He had to leave his job when Hitler moved into Austria. They lived in an apartment block in old Vienna, a very beautiful place. I've never counted, I think there were probably 15 or 20 other apartments in the building. Mom and Fritz went to school. Mom and Fritz didn't even know they were Jewish. Mom's birth certificates, which I'll be giving to you, and her school reports all put her down as of no religion up to 36, 37, with the onslaught of Nazism in Austria, and all of a sudden Mom's school certificates put her down as Catholic. And we were told that Leopold, her dad, was frantic to lose any Jewish connections whatsoever. He spent a lot of money officially becoming a Gentile, officially joining the Catholic Church. Then Mom and Fritz were taken out of school. I think it all happened around the same time. Her dad, Leopold, was removed from his job, again by the Gestapo, and forced to work in the abattoir. And Mom and Fritz were taken out of school. School was closed down. And it's one of the more poignant memories I have of her telling me the story, because the school was nearby, and she told me that the Gestapo took over the school as a little mini concentration camp for Jews. And in my mum's words, I've got the exact TypeScript words that she told me, but she said, we saw terrible things going on in there, in their little school, as the Germans were persecuting, and I think probably slaughtering Jews. Then the talk started about Mom and Fritz getting out of Vienna before war started. I've no detail of how that was broken or what the family must have gone through. His wife Ernestine and Leopold and the 2 children then forced into the ghetto, and somewhere there Leopold must have gone through an intense amount of work to organise Mum out of Vienna with her brother, because it was easy enough for Jewish children to get out, the famous Kindertransport. But Leopold had done such a good job of trying to cover up the fact that they were Jews, that they couldn't go through the normal Jewish bureaucracy to get on the Kindertransport. So I think there were 6 special trains, special Kindertransport, not Sir Nicholas Winston's, but these were organised by Quakers, the Quaker Church, who always traditionally have stepped in for the minority. They brought Fritz and Gertie down to the train. They put them on the train. They had a little cardboard suitcase, just a tiny little one with a few necessities and some food. They had labels around their neck. Mum told me that Ernestine, her mother, ran along the train platform as the train left and shouted at Mum, "Hold Fritz's hand." And Mum told me all the way, ultimately, to Derry, where they ended up. Mum basically held wee Fritz. He was 2 years younger than she was. Held her hand. She said the train was constantly stopped by the Gestapo, German army, whoever, and the little children were taken off at every stop. I don't know where she got the information from, but she said they were taken off to do experiments on. But somehow Mum and Fred, although the train number had dwindled by the time they got to the coast, a lot of the children had been taken off. Mum and Fred got to the coast. They got on a ship. They were brought to London. All the other children were meeting people in London, and Mum and Fred were told they were going to Ireland, which they'd never even heard of. They didn't speak any English, and they proceeded to Belfast by ship and train, and then in Belfast they were told they were now going to Londonderry, and they'd never heard of Ireland, so they definitely hadn't heard of poor old Londonderry, the main city or whatever. They ended up there where a farmer was waiting for them. Now, this had all been obviously organised in advance. He had put in for Jewish orphans or children to adopt or whatever, and he took them to his farm, which was somewhere around the Everglades, and the farmer put them up in the byre along with the cattle and made them work the fields. So they put up with that for either 2 or 3 days, and then at the crack of dawn one morning, it was around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, Fred packed their little case and ran away, and they took the right turn in outside the farm, and they ended up walking, as I say, 4 or 5 in the morning into Derry, and they got onto the bridge, unable to speak any language. They didn't know where they were, and a car drove past at that time in the morning. Now this is where God comes into it, whether or not you believe in him. That car, there shouldn't have been a civilian car at that time in the morning, in the middle of the war, you know. And they waved down the car, and they, as I say, all they spoke was German. Austrians shared the German lingual. They waved down the car, and lo and behold, it was a doctor from the Portrush area who had come from Germany about 12 years before, because he saw the rise of Nazism and spoke their language and understood what they were saying and put them in his car. Now, I don't know how, whether he took them or not, but they ended up back in Belfast. He put them in contact with the Quakers. They were taken to the child haven in the Line, which was run and still is, although it's not a children's home anymore or an orphanage. It was run by the Methodist Church. Mum started getting letters, the Red Cross letters, from her mother and father. Mum was able to go to work and was adopted by a family in Belfast. I don't know what Fred was up to at this stage. Mum wasn't allowed to work, but the Quakers sorted out that she could train as a nurse in Foster Green, which in those days was a Quaker hospital. Quaker run. Foster Green was a tea importer who started the hospital. Mom became a nurse there, a trainee nurse. She lived with a Baptist family off the Malone Road. She was an alien. She wasn't allowed far away from the house and all the rest of it. And in Foster Green Hospital, there was a young Quaker doctor. Mom would have been 18, 19 at this time, and he was in his 30s. Very clever young doctor. And they fell in love and married, and that was my father, Dr. Charlie Warmington, who was a Quaker. So Mom became a Quaker. Yeah. Although they got married, but the people who adopted Mom, they were Baptists. So Mom and Dad, a Jew and a Quaker, got married in Great Victoria Street Baptist Church.